Those who've walked out on first dates, what was your I'm out of here moment? Went first for a walk. He did not shut up for a minute for 1 hour. Complains about everything and everyone in his life, not even ask, nor allow me to give a comment. Point set down. He orders food for me, without even asking, gets his drink. Bartender mentions the caps are difficult to open, but he arrogantly and rudely brushes him off. Tries to open them himself, but ends up spilling juice all over himself. Yells like it was the staff's fault, and how the country he is from is superior. No regard for people, just yelling. At that point, I wanted to get under the table, because that was actually a restaurant I frequently visit, from a small town with just a handful of restaurants. Continues to talk about how superior, and above all that incompetence he is, and when he becomes manager, he would fire people like that. Continues with complaints for another hour. I offer to split the check considering that he talked about money issues, and because I obviously did not want to see him ever again, so did not want to feel like I owe him anything. He yells at me. I leave the money on the table, walk off. He basically continues yelling at stuff for going after check again with the in my country. Talk about how they have it on the spot. Grabs my hand and says angrily to wait for him. Ask me literally 2 questions. Finally, I say I will grab a taxi, but he forcefully insists to walk me home. To avoid him making another scene, I accept. We walk in silence. I try to have him off and leave. He insists to follow me home. How there are probably some dangerous people around. He tried to force himself on me on my front door, the one of the yard fence or how it is called, even though I said I don't think it will work. Exact words, you owe it to me. We went on a date. I did not waste my money for nothing. I literally pushed him off. He was skinnier and threw another $20, besides the ones I already left for my meal in the restaurant, at his face, saying here, we are done. Got instantly in the yard, locked the fence, while hearing him yell, and sent him a text that I will call the police if he does not get the fuck out of there. He left. The worst part is, his aunt was our neighbor, my mom knew his mom, and were good friends, and the next day, on my way out she literally had the audacity to ask how did it all went. I'm pretty sure she heard him screaming awful things since literally their house is like 10 meters from mine, across the street, literally, and I told her just you should have raised him better. They never spoke to me again. I'm absolutely fine with that. Edit. To everyone asking about his country, I have replied to some, but still to answer. He was from Serbia, and I do not hold it against Serbian people. Quite the opposite, nor do I think that was SMH related to his country or their mentality, but his own personal shortcomings, insecurities. And he was probably trying to, I don't know, impress me or show off, or boost his ego, probably all of that. There are shitty assholes like that probably everywhere, so it is not that. Even though yeah, Balkan countries, in general, still have more patriarchal toxic masculinity, macho man syndrome issues compared to some more developed European countries. Their Serbian mentality / standard culture is similar a lot to ours in Macedonia, because not so long ago, like literally when my grandparents were young, these countries lived in Yugoslavia community, and our mindset / culture / development may not be the same, but it is pretty similar, and we share a lot of similarities in culture, so I do not think it was that much of a cultural difference or whatnot, rather projecting and lashing out to compensate for personal insecurities. I go to a bar and meet this cute girl and we get along pretty fine. She invites me back to her place, but it turned out that she was with her friends at the bar and they were just giving her some space for us to talk. They were all drunk and her friend was insisting on driving home, so she, her friend, agreed to let me drive them home because the friend was very set on not leaving her truck parked outside a bar overnight. We get all the way to their apartment complex, and then getting into the parking spot was tricky, so the drunk friend / truck owner insisted on parking, and pulled the I legally own this vehicle card. I was some guy her friend just met at a bar, so I was like okay then. Within 5 seconds she backs the truck into a drainage ditch, and gets it stuck. We all have to push the truck, and get covered in mud. While we were doing that, the girl I met at the bar had lost her wallet, so I dug through the mud water ditch at like 4 AM, and didn't find her wallet. We get back to her place and the mood is definitely ruined. So we end up eating a random cheese and meat platter from Safeway on her kitchen floor at like 4 AM. I sleep on the couch and wake up early, and I think, well, she was great, it was just the whole truck thing that ruined it. I look for a pen and paper to write down my number before leaving. All I can find is a piece of paper taped to the inside of the door. It was a court date notice for a domestic violence/abuse hearing. I just left and chalked it up as a stranger night. Met a girl at a nice gastro pub. We started chatting, and she was immediately being argumentative and picking holes in every mundane thing I said. She was kind of aggressive about it. She mentioned her best friend who has a very unique name. I knew a girl with the same name and we quickly figure out it's the same person. Turns out the girl I'm dating is best friends with my ex-girlfriend's stepsister. This ex of mine was one of my great loves and broke my heart by cheating after 2 years dating. I dated her from 16 to 18, so it was just stupid kid stuff in retrospect and we were never really meant to be together. I told her how my ex and I broke up, and she loved the story. What happened next is the best part. Literally to make me uncomfortable, and for no other reason, she decides to call my ex right there that I hadn't spoken to for years. My ex answers and my date hands me the phone. I say hi, how are you, etc. It was actually nice to speak to her. But the next thing she said is, what the fuck are you doing on a date with her? She's nuts. You need to leave. I told my ex that I was quickly figuring that out and thanked her for the advice. I did leave basically right after that. Our food hadn't even arrived yet. I told her that this is not going well and I'm not sure why we would want to prolong the torture any longer. I tracked the waitress down across the room, paid for all of our drinks and food, and left without saying another word. Total duration, maybe 15 minutes. I later called my ex and thanked her, and we rebuilt a friendship. We are both married and hang out together as couples. While our relationship failed, there was still a lot of love and respect there that isn't burdened by mistakes we made as kids. I'm not sure if we would have become reacquainted without this awful person doing it for us. The girl I was dating later called to apologize. She did a really good and sincere job and owned her part. She admitted she wasn't good at dating and begged for another chance, but I couldn't get over the first impression or the warning I'd been given by someone whose opinion I valued. If this was her on her best behavior, I can only imagine how bad it gets years later. I'm sure she too grew from these mistakes, but any desire I had to know her was killed in those first few minutes. I hope she is much better and healthier today. I have a gem point. Before I met my husband, I went on a date with a guy I met on a dating app. He seemed kind of cute and normal. We clicked through messages, so we decided to meet for coffee at a park. Well, within 5 minutes of conversation, this man mentions his cat. I like animals. I have animals, so I say, "What's your cat's name?" He tells me, along with the other 14. Yes, let me say that again. 15 total. Catsy and his mom own. Oh, yeah. Also, he lives with his mom. But really his mom lives with him apparently. And the car he's driving is his mom's, but he was keeping it tuned up. Also, he mentioned to his mom that we were going on a date and showed her pictures of me, and she agreed that our features combined would make an agreeable grandchild. What the fuck? Noped right out of there. And this guy proceeds to somehow find me on social media without knowing my last name and messages me every day for 3 weeks about why am I not answering his phone calls or text messages. So I blocked him. Then he found me on another dating app somehow and messages me on there. The messages included, but are not limited to, how he thinks we would make a great couple and I'd make a great wife. How if I don't like cats he has no problem putting them in his garage when I come over. Again, all 15 of them. How he'd like to meet my dog he somehow found out I owned. And how he thought I was so pretty. But had I tried being a blonde yet, I deleted that dating app and moved shortly after a few hours away for unrelated reasons and met my wonderful, amazingly normal husband. First date. He talks non-stop for almost an hour about his fasting for 40 days and becoming spiritually awake like Gandhi and Jesus. That people lined up for blocks to get spiritual advice until he had to start charging them. then asks my birth date, pulls out some comparability chart, and proceeds to tell me how we are a 10 for communication and compatibility first date, lied about his age, must have been 20 years older, and proceeded to cry, telling me he wanted someone to wake up next time. First date arrived. He began his confession of 3 years in prison for aggravated assault, his Russian bride who was stolen by a brother, and his extremely strange family life. After 3 hours of listening, finally was able to leave. Felt it had to be a cautiously friendly exit point. First date, meets at a restaurant. I'm stuffed, and he doesn't eat his food at all. Second date, takes me to an expensive restaurant. Again I'm stuffed, ran before the date, and again he doesn't eat. So awkward. First date goes really well. Dude ends it by saying that he almost feels like he wants to say the L word to me. Yikes. First date, man suggests a hike he is in no way in shape to complete and doesn't even bring enough water. He is like twice my size and really dehydrated, so I offer him some of my water. I reuse bottles all the time, so I told him it really wasn't smart water, it was tap water. He is seriously in a bad place and I know I can't carry him down this mountain, but he refuses to drink the water because he doesn't drink tap water because of the chlorine. He finally gave in when he almost passed out. Point dating blah. Went on a date with a girl I had matched with on a dating app. We had talked for about a week and had really hit it off. So naturally I invited her out one night to meet up at a nearby sushi bar for drinks and food. As soon as I met her, she just could not put away her cell phone away and was texting non-stop on it. After a terse couple of single-worded answers from her, we walk into the bar and we grab a seat and order a few shots. I thought maybe she was on her phone because she was just a bit nervous and thought a few shots would calm both our nerves. The shots come, we take them, but she's still glued to her phone. At this point I'm getting annoyed. Eventually she puts the phone down, face up, and within a few seconds her phone is notifying us that she has some text messages. Since her phone is face up, I can see that a Jake is texting her. She also sees it and immediately flips her phone over, but doesn't silence it, and over the course of the next few minutes her phone buzzes an annoying number of times. Eventually, I just ask her who was texting and if she needed to reply back to all the texts. She replies with a no, it's just this guy Jake, who I hooked up with a few weeks ago, and he won't leave me alone. Now, being the funny smart as that I was, I made a "was it Jake from State Farm" joke. Those commercials were big at this point, but my joke missed, and she immediately went back to texting him and basically ignoring me, which was the straw that broke me. I got up, finished my steak, and said I'm out. No need to contact me after this, and I walked out of the bar. As I'm exiting and walking past the front window, I can see her saying "you motherfaking." I later found out that Jake was her boyfriend who was on a business trip in another country for a few months. Dodge a couple bullets there. Probably doesn't count. I was at a bar and met a woman there before trivia started, and we sorta hit it off and made a team, and it sorta turned into a spontaneous date. Point trivia takes a while to get through, and she got pretty wasted. And she got super irritating. Point without getting into specifics, she got passive aggressive and annoying. She was asking me some questions, and I was like, well, this is a subject I'm a little sensitive on. Let's just not talk about that now. And she kept needling me and promised it would be fine and she wouldn't say anything to offend me and I should just tell her. So I did, and she immediately messed it up in the way that really bothers me, and I kept trying to tell her over and over how she was messing it up, and she didn't bother listening. She just kept getting it wrong over and over, so finally she gets it through her head that she's bothered me, and she apologizes, but in that special passive aggressive way which says, okay, now it's your turn to tell me that it's fine. I didn't do anything wrong, and that it's your fault for not explaining it well enough to begin with. And weirdly enough I did not feel like doing that. Point this goes on for 10 minutes. I keep trying to accept her apology and change the subject, and she keeps coming back to it, like talking slowly and simply like she's talking to an idiot. She cannot figure out why I don't realize that I have to tell her she did nothing wrong. Finally, while she's in mid-sentence, she's basically always been in mid-sentence for the past 10 minutes, because she will not shut up, making sure I know how wrong I am, I turn away from her and say to the bartender, Please, dear God, close me out so I can leave. She got wide-eyed and shocked, like I had just slapped her. That's what sticks with me. The fact that after 5 minutes of me trying to talk over her to tell her she was doing the one thing she had promised me she wouldn't do, and 10 more minutes of treating me like I had misbehaved by letting her be awful to me, she was utterly flabbergasted to learn I wasn't having a good time. Like, I'm a woman, I'm showing interest in a man. It literally never occurred to her that any man might have standards, that any one of us might not put up with absolutely anything if we think there's a chance we'll get to touch boobs. I'm sure she's out there right now making some poor desperate schmuck's life absolutely miserable. Went on what I thought was a friend hangout with an exchange student, met him playing soccer at the college. He seemed really friendly and kept asking to get dinner together. I was single, but still mentally getting over my ex who had cheated on me, so I told him I wasn't in a place to date, but that if he wanted to be friends and check out the city, platonically and no physical stuff, I'd be game. He said that was all he'd meant and agreed it would be fun. We went to get dinner, all was fine. On the way out he physically picked me up with no warning. I asked him to please put me down because I don't like being picked up. Very calmly and politely he laughed and said he'd looked through my Facebook and knows I used to be chubby, but that I'll look fine now, so I don't have to be shy about men lifting me. OBV was incredibly weirded out, but he'd been so nice before, and I chalked it up to cultural differences and brushed it off. I dropped him back off at his house and he invited me in so I could say hi to his roommates. It was still light out, and I'd been very clear about the platonic bit, so I figured what the heck. He immediately steers me to his room, where he gets out a headscarf that he tells me belongs to his mother and that his future wife will wear, and proceeds to tie it around my head. I awkwardly tell him it's lovely and try to return it to him while he insists that I keep it. I'm feeling real weird now and want to get out of there without setting him off, so I repeat that I couldn't possibly accept such a lovely gift with such meaning to his family. Then he grabs me, falls backward onto his bed holding onto me, and tried kissing me. I shoved him off and just started screaming at him at this point, and then he tried to do it again, ran out of the house, while he followed telling me how stuck up I am. Then he texted me the next day saying he can't believe how frigid I am and how dramatic I'm being. I blocked him, and he showed up outside my work when I was closing a few days later. I never told him where I worked, with a wireless phone charging brick. Because according to this fool, I must be having problems keeping my phone charged, since I haven't been texting him back. Edit to at. Ironically enough, had he not pulled back the veil on his deep wells of Nasegahiness, I probably would have considered dating him when I was ready. He'd been so polite, friendly and nice for 2 months at soccer up to that point. I had no idea that was lurking beneath the surface. Just a nasty, rude person. Maybe she had a bad day, who knows, but she said something that I just lost patience with and scooted basically mid-meal. We went to a cool but not expensive hipsterish restaurant. It was a Friday night and they were busy. She complained the whole time about the service being slow and then stupid for having a hard time understanding her over the loud noise. She made fun of the other customers, not in a cleverly observational Larry David way, just a senselessly mean and petty way. The break point was at one point she made a comment about my appearance that in hindsight must have been meant as some flirtatious shade, but I just took that personally, and regardless of intent it was an unflattering thing to say. I wolfed my food and then signaled for the check. I waited an agonizing 5/10 minutes while it came, then stood up, threw down enough cash for my meal and a generous tip for both of us. She'd been such a monster to the servers I knew she wasn't going to tip anything, and started putting my windbreaker on. She asked me, "Are you cold?" "No." "Oh, where are we headed next then?" "Home." And when I said that, she looked confused for a second, then gave me a coy look and said, "Oh okay, yeah, I'm down for Netflix," and, realizing what she thought I was implying, I just said, "Oh, no, I meant alone." Out the patio right onto the street and freedom. I was 23, 24. Young people reading this, do not do a restaurant for a first date unless it is someone you know / are already friends with and know there's a spark before you sit down to a meal. Go for drinks or coffee. It's cheaper, more casual and easy to converse. It's also easier to disengage. You can pound a beer or a coffee and scoot away in seconds, unlike a meal. I went on a date with another dude who suggested a coffee shop as a date, which was perfect cause who doesn't love coffee. Anyway, I get there early, order myself a coffee and a waffle. He comes and sits down and introduces himself. Some time passes by, and I ask him, aren't you gonna order anything? He responds with, no, I don't like coffee, and that was a red flag cause he suggested the coffee shop knowing that they have coffee. He then proceeds to watch me eat and drink, which made me uncomfortable. Anyways, we go back into his car, because he was also my ride home, where we talk about our interests, where this man tells me I believe that sheer will and determination can cure anything. I'm a nursing major, and I was like, oh no, when he said that, but I wanted to test that and see how far that went. So I ask him, what about cancer? Do you believe that can be cured with sheer will and determination? He's like, yay, and I ask him, what about chemotherapy? I don't believe in chemotherapy. Not only that, but he then tried to tell me that HIV was also curable, but I legit worked in a Planned Parenthood for about 2 years, and I have to inform this guy that it is not curable, but it is treatable. Then he drops the biggest surprise on me. He tells me that he has HSV1, which, if you don't know, is herpes. And then he tries to kiss me point besides the shitty date. I preferred if he told me his health status beforehand cause that was a deal breaker for me both alongside and without everything that transpired. Safe to say he dropped me off and I deleted his info and never contacted him again. The one where I didn't realize it was a date. Years ago, recently moved to a new neighborhood, and a neighbor guy, 2 houses down, invited me and my kids to a bonfire. He had a daughter just a bit older than my own and assured me there would be plenty of other people and kids there. Just show up whenever we got there, and the kids all started playing and running around, which was great. I sat down and started talking to the lady next to me. I was thinking this was a great way to meet new people in the neighborhood and was feeling pretty good at the moment. Then she asks me how I met her brother. Okay, it's a family member, NBD, and I explain I'm a new neighbor. She then excitedly grabs my arm and says how happy she is her brother and I got together so quickly. What? Turns out, every adult there was related to this guy, and he told them all I was his new girlfriend and this was his chance to introduce me to his family. What the fuck? I'm trying to see if this is an elaborate prank while internally screaming, and he comes up behind me and puts his hand on my shoulder. He introduces me by the wrong name, which made it more surreal, and says he's so happy to finally have me there. All of these people are beaming at us and all I could do was weakly say, you're wrong. I just met you 4 days ago. I've only just moved to this neighborhood 2 weeks ago. I then grabbed my kids and dragged them home. My kids weren't allowed to hang out with the daughter unless it was a group of the neighborhood kids and never at their house. I avoided that guy in every way possible and have no idea how he explained my quick retreat to his family. I was going to meet someone that I had been talking to online for a couple months. At the time I was a divorced single mom, and between work and the kids was just really looking for adult conversation. This was also back when chat rooms were commonplace online. The chat room that frequented was for the local city I lived in, and me and him seemed to get along, and he kept wanting to meet in person, but I kept saying no. So he asked if I was going to the next chat party. People from the chat room would all gather at one of the local clubs to meet and put a face to the screen names. We would wear name tags with our chat names and not give our real names. So I show up to the chat party and was having a great time till he showed up. The minute he made eye contact me, the hair on the back of my neck stood up and every alarm bell in my head went off. He tried to dominate any conversation anyone close to him was having. Practically acted like he owned me, asked where I lived, asked what I drove, and I lied to him about both. Tried to get away the first time by saying I had to go to the bathroom, but when I came out of the ladies' room, he was right there waiting for me. Must not have been the first time he was ditched. He kept trying to buy me drinks. I don't drink, and had on a designated driver bracelet, so I was getting free soft drinks all night. I finally told him I would take a drink while he went to the bar. I beelined it for the door. Don't know if you saw me or not, but I drove straight to the police depot I worked for, went inside and just visited for a couple hours, and made sure one of the officers followed me home, and checked the area the rest of the night. Just in case he saw me leave and managed to follow me, he never came back into the chat room again, at least not by that screen name. I was going to meet someone that I had been talking to online for a couple months. At the time I was a divorced single mom, and between work and the kids was just really looking for adult conversation. This was also back when chat rooms were commonplace online. The chat room that frequented was for the local city I lived in, and me and him seemed to get along, and he kept wanting to meet in person, but I kept saying no. So he asked if I was going to the next chat party. People from the chat room would all gather at one of the local clubs to meet and put a face to the screen names. We would wear name tags with our chat names and not give our real names. So I show up to the chat party and was having a great time till he showed up. The minute he made eye contact me, the hair on the back of my neck stood up and every alarm bell in my head went off. He tried to dominate any conversation anyone close to him was having. Practically acted like he owned me, asked where I lived, asked what I drove, and I lied to him about both. Tried to get away the first time by saying I had to go to the bathroom, but when I came out of the ladies' room, he was right there waiting for me. Must not have been the first time he was ditched. He kept trying to buy me drinks. I don't drink, and had on a designated driver bracelet, so I was getting free soft drinks all night. I finally told him I would take a drink while he went to the bar. I beelined it for the door. Don't know if you saw me or not, but I drove straight to the police depot I worked for, went inside and just visited for a couple hours, and made sure one of the officers followed me home, and checked the area the rest of the night. Just in case he saw me leave and managed to follow me, he never came back into the chat room again, at least not by that screen name. Years ago I met a guy on a dating website. We talked for about 2 weeks, and I thought he was really cute and funny. We shared a lot of nerdy interests, and seemed to click. I'm on the ace spectrum, and it's really unusual for me to be attracted to someone/want to date, so I was excited when we made plans to meet up. He asked if I could meet at his place that was 40 minutes away, and I agreed, since he said he'd drive us around for the date itself. He opened the door and looked nothing like his pictures, honestly just unkempt and frumpy. I get that people post their most flattering pictures, and I didn't want to be judgmental based on my own expectations, so I wanted to continue and see how we vibed. Instead of heading off to our date, he invited me inside to check out his game collection first, since it's something we had talked about having in common. What I saw was a completely empty living room except for a TV on the floor hooked up to a PS2, a cardboard box of games and a lone wood chair. Bare walls, no other furniture, items, etc. He did offer me the chair while he sat on the floor to show me some of his games. I made light conversation about it while he played some, all the while trying to ignore the mattress with no sheet on the floor that I could see through his bedroom door down the hall. After about 20 minutes I asked about the plans he had for our date, which I hoped would be some kind of activity or getting food, since I really wanted to get out of the creepily empty house that we were alone in as soon as possible. He tells me that he has some friends showing up, so we meet them outside, all of whom seemed very nice. They stood around talking for another 20 minutes until he suggests to them in a very weird tone that almost seemed rehearsed, a Nerf gun fight. They all agree, and I'm like sure, not what I was expecting but sounds fun. Except that I don't get a Nerf gun to join in with. I end up just sitting there on the front steps watching them run around his front lawn shooting Nerf gun darts at each other. I try to be a good spectator and cheer them on, but it was incredibly awkward, like a show he put on for me to watch. After watching them chase each other around for a while, he asks if I want to go do something and I agree, thinking our date would actually start. What we do is walk down the street. I don't think he ended up even having a car, to a local game shop where he and his friends began playing MTG. I don't play tabletop games and had no cards of my own, No idea how the game worked or anything. He didn't really engage with me beyond playing the game and narrating what he was doing, again like he was showing off / performing for me without actually interacting or talking to me. One of his friends could tell how uncomfortable I was and struck up a conversation with me, explaining the rules of the game, asking me questions about my interests, etc. After half an hour of sitting through that, I decided I just couldn't handle it anymore and got up to leave. My date followed me out of the building and without saying very much else and tried to kiss me on the mouth as I was leaving. I immediately dodged it, told him no thank you, left and never spoke to him again.